Good afternoon or good during lunchtime, everybody. Johan and I will talk about the Belfius data strategy and how we use our corporate data platform to actually become more data driven and so also API driven at Belfius. First, I would like to give some introduction on who is Belfius, because everybody knows Belfius as the bank, most likely. But I would like to give some information, some data on our Belfius ambitions, the regulatory context that we need to adhere to, because it's when you talk about data, data is highly regulated for a bank insurer, which we are. So that's why we need to talk about the regulatory context. Our data platform, our corporate data model, which is also one of the key elements actually in order to become API driven for us. And Johan will explain how we get from the model towards an API. And so I share also some best practices or some main insights that we discovered during our implementations. Good. So Belfius, we want to be meaningful and inspiring for the Belfius society, of Belgian society together. So we are unique in Belgium because we are a fully owned Belgian bank insurer. So we have over 3.6 million customers, almost 600 branches, 9,500 employees, something working at Belfius Bank and Insurance, and also in our different brands, or working for our different brands. And of course, our flagship that we always want to mention is our mobile app, where we are actually nominated as the #1 app of the world. And we do actually quite a lot with our mobile app. So 55 million monthly digital interaction that we have with our 3.6, or actually it's 2.1 million active users on our mobile app. So we have still some catching up to do to actually onboard all of our customers in the mobile app, but we are at 2/3 in the way already. So who are we? Myself, I'm Wouter Boussemaere. I joined Belfius 5 years ago, and I'm leading the enterprise data and integration architecture team. I have sufficient or quite a lot of experience when it comes to enterprise architecture, more specifically in the data area. And I'm responsible for the corporate data platform design at Belfius Bank and Insurance. We, as architecture, are positioned within the IT technical or transversal services, which are organized in Belfius Bank and Insurance. And this is really shared between Belfius Bank and Insurance. So we are working in a together mode. So we work for both bank and the insurance. And I will let Johan present himself if he wants to, or otherwise he just nods and say, yeah, you can go on. Okay, so Johan is who is the co-host or the co-presenter today, is a member of my team. He has joined Belfius 2.5 years ago as the integration architect to help with the API management at first, but has received more and more responsibilities in becoming more data-driven and API-driven. And he's also very much involved in the master data domains of party, product, and distribution at Belfius. So if we continue, so Belfius, meaningful and inspiring for the Belgian society together, what does that really mean for us? So that means for us that we want to have digital leadership. So we want to strive for a human digital excellence. Maybe you have heard about phygital, so physical and digital. We want to mix, we want to come to an optimum mix between the two ways of interacting with the customers. So we want to have a constant focus on customer interaction and trust. So it's for us, it's really, really important that everybody trusts us, and we have a constant focus on that customer satisfaction in order to detect if anybody has some mistrust or if anything is coming up, which we would like to avoid. We are currently reinventing banking and insurance because what we are at our side, because what we really want to do is we want to switch to personalized advice and giving meaningful and inspiring insights in many, many different areas, not only when it comes to saving, but also when it comes to obtaining a credit or getting a new assurance or insurance from Belfius. It's safety, privacy, and trust by design, and we want to have efficient processes. So we want to have STP, so straight through processes first, which are data supported and AI enabled, and all that is glued together or stitched together through APIs, of course. If we look at that Belfius strategy, that strategy translates into ambitions for Belfius data, and data is really for us the cornerstone. And we want to switch from batch-based data operations to real-time data integrations. And if you want to do real-time data integrations, you need to have your things in order, and also your API lifecycle needs to be top-notch. We want to be also enable our processing of new data types, harmonize our toolings and way of working within the group, so that such skills can be used transversely, so that anybody which has the necessary skills can also be put into the workings of other teams. All data we expose to our consumers is governed and secured via the corporate data model, which is for us a cornerstone and a key element in the whole setup. And also we want to have end-to-end stacks for reporting, AI analytics, and decision, putting up the business in the driver's seat. So the business is really owner of the models, owner of the process there, but IT still supports and maintains the platforms for them. Safety, privacy, and trust, a cornerstone of our corporate data platform design. It's really a cornerstone because our commitment is we want to have customer satisfaction and trust always as the first thing of top of mind. So the security of our customer data, it's our first concern. We really want to respect our customers' privacy, because if the customer has opts out, we really opt out, and it's never used in any automated flow. We want to respect the regulatory context, and the regulatory context, I jump in that just after. And we want to protect at all cost our customers' personal data, so that we can be considered as a trusted party in that sense. So if we go one step deeper, when we state security of our customer data, our first concern, it's really not a hollow statement, because Belfius as a bank insurance has to comply with several Belgian and European directives, including, for instance, the ECB and the Belgian National Bank on operational business continuity and security. For instance, Solvency II, IFRS 17, everybody, I think, or most of the people who work in banking or insurance have heard about Solvency II, IFRS 17. AML models is very specific for banking, but also GDPR. It's something that's top of everybody's mind. And actually, we had an extra curveball thrown by Schrems 2, which when we try to bring data to the cloud, because that's also one of the things that we're aiming to, not only working on premises and having it working it in our own data center or computing in our own data center, but also leverage the abilities of the cloud and really go forward, but on a stepwise approach. And also we're doing more than only what we have to. For instance, there is also a European AI framework, which are more guidelines, similar to what we had as a precursor to GDPR. But it's really something that we would like to work on from the very beginning, so we are ready and don't have to have a very big uptake or a very big step to take whenever it becomes legislation. So we want to abide by the guidelines as much as possible from the very beginning. So when we are now switching over to the corporate data platform, that's really for us a rationalization of for a future new target. Because what we see here on the left-hand side is really where we come from. It's sort of a spaghetti. From banking and insurance, we have two completely separated platforms or execution pipelines, which are feeding back and forth data in order to comply with all of the regulations. And as you see it here on the left-hand side, we have in every component that we have basically calculation engines. And for us, a calculation engine is where you actually run your model or run some code in order to calculate new values. And we would like to change that paradigm in the future. So what we would like to do is we want to bring a corporate data model or a corporate data platform in a Belfius Together modus, where we actually have guaranteed delivery, guaranteed quality, guaranteed governance. So it's really a governed platform where we collect all of the data from the operational systems and feed that data whenever the data is needed to a calculation engine, which is extracted from the actual storage solution, and we move those results back into the results layer, which then is in turn is used by any core banking or core insurance platform or a subsidiary platform where they actually consume the data for operational purposes. But on the other hand, we also would like to, as we have a whole central data layer here, that we actually use it also for financial and risk reporting, but also for financial risk analysis or any other analytics. Even the customer analytics is done on the same platform. So we would like to, and for instance, we like to enable the data science community that they are actually using or creating that data to create models, and with that models, those are industrialized as a calculation engine, for instance, for finance or risk, or maybe even for commercial purposes. And in that sense, this is the whole cycle of data is being consumed, model created, calculation engine industrialized, and then the results are used either for reporting purposes again or in an operational context. So that's it. The evolution, it's for us an evolution to that corporate data platform. Of course, if you see that spaghetti that we had on the left-hand side, what we would like to become is we would like to have one data platform instead of multiple fragmented data warehouses and analytical solutions or even operational solutions. So we would like to avoid data redundancy and inconsistencies between those fragmented solutions, focusing on real-time integration and analytical processing, generating insights in operational processes like fraud analytics, dynamic pricing, customer next best action, all to enable that straight-through processing purposes. What we also would like to have is multiple plugin calculation engines with multiple owners. So it's not a calculation engine is owned, a single calculation engine is owned by a single owner, but it's not because you have one calculation that everything runs in the same engine. So the business owns the data and the model, as I said before, and IT manages the platform. The only source for data should be or should become the corporate data platform, at least for the very minimum for everything which is master data related. So when it comes to party, product, asset, agreement, distribution data. That's what we really would like to have in a single repository, both used for operational and analytical purposes. What we also would like to have is that all of our critical EUC reporting, and EUC stands for end using computing, and calculation engines, that we should transfer them to a calculation engine platform that is hosted by IT and then plugged onto the CDP instead of doing all of those replications in personal data stores and where they actually start calculating and feeding that data into some reports or even in operational systems. When we talk about corporate data platform here, it's very abstract, and now I dive a little bit deeper in the corporate data platform architecture. And for us, it consists of three key areas based on an IAM bedrock and with some IT or digital transversal data functions on top. Well, what is special or specific in our architecture is that we have a data exposure layer in the middle. And for us, it's really key to decouple the storage and the consumption areas because it allows both storage and the consumption to evolve at its own pace. So, and in that sense, facilitating our cloud ambitions at Belfius. Because what we really would like to do is we would like to keep the model that we expose as stable as possible, independent of in which data storage for technology it's actually stored, and exposing for data consumption, of which, for instance, API is one of the data consumption areas. Our data exposure layer is where we actually where the corporate data model actually lives, and also where the identity and access management is enforced and full data governance is applied, because we have as a statement, if you want to expose it through our data exposure layer, then you need to have the minimum on data governance there, meaning you have to have an owner and a firm definition of your data concept. But you can go on and on because also the corporate data model in itself is part of the data governance workflow at Belfius. So if we then jump yet again a bit deeper in the data ecosystem, you can see it's extremely big and it spans a myriad of areas. And for each of those areas, we have challenges and we have solutions for each other. So if you look at from left to right, the data exposure, again, is sitting in the middle where we actually position our data virtualization solution, and where we actually on that enforce our CDM. Our EIM is also top of mind because of the whole regulatory context, etc. Also, data governance is what we're working very heavily on, and also the BI and model life cycles. Because if you want to create for instance, a calculation engine that you actually run and that feeds back data into your operational data hubs, for instance, you need to have your model firmly under control. And also what we're currently doing is shaping our platform in the cloud. So what we're currently doing is also picking and choosing technologies in the cloud in our own Azure tenant for the moment. When we then go on data virtualization, because I drill down a bit deeper every time I progress. So what we would like to do is I would like to position our data virtualization really as our central component where we connect data from different sources. Let it be an existing database or data warehouse, a SaaS or a cloud solution, even Excels or flat files or PDF documents. You can connect to virtually any source. You can combine that, or you can combine your data and transform your data into a model that you would like to publish, and then you publish your real-time data services. The key characteristics that we have on our data virtualization are really easy access to all our data. It's a virtual data layer, so meaning that you don't replicate data just or store your transform data. You minimize your data replication in that sense. Also, you optimize your performance because you can you have a whole myriad or a Swiss Army knife of solutions that you can use within the data virtualization platform to optimize performance, because it's in a way, it's a big query rewrite functionality. So it's real time, at least it's right time, because it's the moment that you query your data, you actually fetch the latest and greatest available data through your data virtualization platform. You have data services. You can create a real-time data services layer, and those can be reused. It aids in lighter and more flexible integration mechanisms, because you don't need to do all that work of creating a central model and populating that model first through ETL. That's no longer necessary because you can connect to basically any data source, and it integrates with existing toolings. So it exposes APIs, it exposes itself through JDBC or ODBC. So it's really queryable from a reporting or an application point of view. At Belfius, we have chosen for TIBCO data virtualization as our data virtualization platform provider. So similar to traditional warehousing, as you can imagine, where you have first an ODS, a CDS, and an UDS, you have a similar layered approach within data virtualization. And on the left-hand side, you can see we have a source connectivity layer, our CDM layer, where we really enforce the CDM model. And then you have an application or user layer, which is similar to our UDS. So the connectivity layer actually allows us to read the data and combine the data from a whole myriad of different sources, let it be files, databases, on mainframe, on open systems, you name it, you can basically connect to it. Our corporate data model layer is where we expose our enterprise APIs, and that that data is represented in the sources is not always in line with the business semantics, and that's where that semantical translation happens. So where we also give meaning to our data, and it's through that mechanism, by giving meaning and semantics to our data, it is becoming a source, or the sole source for our API layer. And API and user layer, so that's what we call experience APIs. That's where you actually, if you say, okay, I have too many round trips towards the CDM because that resource is too fine-grained. I would like to have a recombination of those resources, because I don't want to go for each party. I want to fetch the address, but I want to fetch the party and the address in one call. Then we foresee, or we have foreseen, that you can create a customer info service, so to say, which combines that request in a single request. When talking about corporate data model, for us, it's really a Belfius tailor-made Esperanto. Esperanto is a language that is spoken, and meaning that everybody can understand each other, and it's rather simple in grammar and rather simple in vocabulary, because that's also supporting us in the data governance and the API integration strategy. Before, if you look at it, we didn't have any corporate data model. That doesn't mean that we didn't have any definitions, but it was not shared corporate. So not enterprise-wide, it was not shared. So now we really aligned our definitions, or are aligning, because it's still a work ongoing, but that we are aligning our definition between bank and insurance and our subsidiaries, so that everybody understands the same thing when they mention a certain term. For instance, if somebody says agreement, that everybody agrees that this is what an agreement means, and these are the basic data elements that you get when fetching an agreement. So what we had was a silo-based management of that data. So also with potential different interpretations of that replicated data, and only the physical data models were really managed, because they were really necessary to get to manipulate the actual data models in the database, in the operational databases. Because without that physical data model in our tooling, you couldn't get a database change. So it's all forward engineering from the model on. Where we want to go now is or in the near future, or the future, is we want to have one corporate data model. So following the data governance processes and classifications. So meaning that we have one common language, only one definition per term, clear ownership and stewardship, which is shared across business lines and aligned with the business capabilities, and not to the applications any longer. Because for us, that's a big difference, because now, since it's physical data model only, it's very much linked to the physical data model, and it's very much linked to the application. And also what we want to do is we want to shift that towards the business, because applications managed by IT, we would like to give that ownership back to the business, and therefore we want to link that to the business capabilities. And also we use it as a canonical language in our API definitions to avoid point-to-point integration, or not really point-to-point, but point-to-point definitions of our integrations. And therefore we have a whole CDM cycle, how we actually develop a CDM and actually enable API development in the end. So in the end, I want to give some best practices, because I saw that there was a question popping up, but I haven't been able to actually look at them, because it popped up and it vanished again, so I can't respond right away. But I think that we'll take it up during our Q&A. For us, some best practices, it's like changing an oil tanker into a speedboat. So sometimes you see a picture where an airplane gets fixed or gets built during middle of the flight. Here it's really, we want to use the image of an oil tanker, which has to speed up. It's a slow thing that needs to speed up, and it needs to become a speedboat while making it run on solar energy. So we switch the power. And also we want it to remain operational, so it can deliver oil, which was expected by the client yesterday. And for us, it's all about change management. So people, minds, and technologies. It's not only technology, bringing in new technology, it's also changing the people's minds. So they need to think differently. Explaining the why and how of the entire ecosystem is something that is continuously ongoing, and it requires quite an effort to actually get it adopted. You can't do this alone. If you put such a thing in place, make sure you have a group of ambassadors that share the heavy lifting with you and do some communication, because it's all about communication. You need to create a Pathfinders team to lead the way. We have seen, we didn't do that in the beginning, and we left our solutioning teams doing that themselves, but we had many first-time technical or sometimes functional issues that appeared, and that's not good for delivery. So delivery timings are no longer kept or cannot no longer be kept, and therefore we need to dedicate staff that had a clear mandate and times to solve those issues, because you really need to get those dedicated staffs. Otherwise, you will not be able to deliver things at the same speed, because it's change, and it requires a new way of working, and that new way of working you need to build up, or that competence you need to build up at first before you actually spread it out into the organization. Please start with items that bring business value. Don't start with some side thing. It needs to bring business value from the beginning. So if you choose use cases to implement such a corporate data platform, choose them wisely. Not too big, but also not too small, because if it's too small, it doesn't bring enough business value. And data touches everything. So avoid changing all at once. Don't forget to focus on master data as well, because if you only look into what you have necessary for an operational process, it might not suffice, because master data is at the core of every transaction or any action that you actually do with your data. So also have enough focus on master data. And you have to create a practice around corporate data modeling for both conceptual and the logical versions. So in that sense, I finished my explanation, and I think I have time for questions now. Or Peter?
Yes, I propose we go through them in the order that people have asked them.
Yes.
So Maxime, I will start with your question. So basically, the question of Maxime Verbist was the size of the team that worked at Belfius on this architecture, and how long do you will need to realize it fully? And then also the question was, are you tackling this in a waterfall approach, or using an agile methodology? How are you actually realizing this vision?
Yeah, we're actually using an agile methodology. So our agile, it's BADM, Belfius Agile Delivery Model, is used as a methodology. So in that sense, we can say it's agile. On the other hand, the size of the team, it's a whole myriad of different teams that actually are working on all these topics. I mentioned already the Pathfinders, but also our data domain, our delivery team. Also, we have several different business teams doing that whole CDM modeling and doing the uptake in that sense. Data governance team is involved, so it's a collaboration of many different teams. And when it comes to sizing, Johan, I think we are approximately 60 people working on all this combined.
Yeah, indeed, more or less. I think about 60, maybe even more, depends on how many projects are requesting some requirements from the data platform. So, but I think the for the moment the minimal capacity is around 50 to 60 people.
Moving on to the next question, it's about the data virtualization sources. Who or what did you use to put the data inside the different sources, and where does the data come from?
For the data virtualization sources, what we mainly do is if it's residing on the mainframe DB2, because everything we collect from mainframe DB2 is actually through a Kix transaction at Belfius for now. In that sense, Kix is not very friendly and consumes quite a lot of MIPS on our mainframe, and that's where we want to shift actually to, and we offload that data through a CDC mechanism, which is click replicate, which is used to our Oracle Exadata, which we then use as our real-time replica of that data.
Yeah. And then a question from Tim: how do you avoid that the corporate data platform becomes a single point of failure?
Actually, what we have is our corporate data platform is not a platform or not a single database platform in itself. It exposes itself as a single database, so to say, through data virtualization, but it's much more than that. And our data virtualization solution is actually completely set up in high available fashion, clustered. We have, for instance, for our operational consumption, because we have an analytical and an operational flavor in that sense. For our operational solution, we have, I think it's a server park of 16 servers or 16 nodes, a cluster with 16 nodes handling all of the requests for operational purposes. Our analytical is much smaller, but much bigger dimensions per server.
Yeah. Looking at the clock, I propose that we go